Where do I begin with this video? I struggled for a while about whether or not to make this video. I didn't want to be doing any clickbait type of thing and having a title of quit carnivore, or I started eating vegetables, or why is everybody quitting carnivore? Because everybody is not quitting carnivore. Some people have introduced vegetables or something, but they're not like everybody is quitting carnivore, right? So that's all clickbaity stuff. Um, Talking about all of this whole of people quitting carnivore or eating vegetables now again, just to me that was seemed so clickbaity, and I just didn't want to get involved in it. I don't want to be the person that's just out there trying to get views. So I really struggled. But Coach Bronson made some really good points in a video I was watching, and I said, you know what? I think people really need to hear this message. It's the same message that I completely agree with and everything. So I said, I'm going to finally make this video. So here it is. Here's that video. And what I want you, first of all, to understand is that not everybody is quitting carnivore. Some people are introducing some vegetables. But let's even talk about whether or not they're not carnivore. And here's a key thing. Like, let's just look at this is scientific data for the term carnivore. There's also a term hypercarnivore, and we're going to talk about those things real quick. Okay, a carnivore is any animal whose diet consists mostly of meat, meaning animal tissue is the main source of energy and nutrients. The word describes a broad category of meat-eating animals. By the way, humans are scientifically considered animals, just in case you're wondering. Carnivores can still eat some non-meat foods depending on their species or environment. Now let's look at the scientific definition of hypercarnivore. A hypercarnivore is a specific type of animal, I can't even talk, a specific type of carnivore, I should say, whose diet is 70% or more meat. The remaining portion of up to 30% can include non-meat foods such as fruit, insects, or plant material. Hypercarnivores depend heavily, though, on animal flesh for survival and have biological traits adapted to a high protein, high fat diet. All right, so let's look at some differences here. Carnivores in the human diet context, right, means, and this is coming directly from Chat GPT, by the way, in this case here. Carnivore in the human diet context means they're describing a hyper carnivore style eating pattern. That means 70 to 100% of their diet comes from meat, fish, eggs, or animal fats, or animal fats, with little to no plant foods are included. So all hypercarnivores are carnivores, but not all carnivores are hypercarnivores. Okay. All right. So now we kind of got that down. Human diet context, they're talking about hypercarnivores, which is 70% or more meat. So if somebody has introduced a little bit of vegetables, they're still carnivore. I saw a video recently of Dr. Barry's wife, Nisha. And she says, I'm not carnivore. The reason why she says that is because so many people complained when they saw her eat a little bit of vegetables or some berries. And she's like, I'm not carnivore. So, Dr. Berry is, I'm not, think it that way. But in reality, by definition, she is still a carnivore because she gets almost all of her sources, all of her nutritional sources from animals. Okay. Now, I think it's also interesting to note that hypercarnivores really do not digest plants very well. Okay. Nearly all their nutrition comes from animal sources. Again, we're talking 70% or more meat. And by definition, they do not digest plants very well at all. Carnivores in general eat mostly animal product, meat, right? But they can digest plants too. And that is a difference that should be put out there. But remember, we're talking hyper carnivores when we're talking about the human diet context here. Okay. So that's the first piece we got to talk about. Now, I've seen people all over social media saying this person is no longer carnivore. For instance, there's been posts out there that, oh, Dr. Kills is no longer carnivore. He said in a video that he's eating broccoli now. Well, if you go back, he said maybe I should, but I have not introduced broccoli yet or anything like that. All I've done is I've added fish, seafood, that kind of stuff, which is still part of carnivore, right? So there's a lot of misconception out there, a lot of people spreading untruthful things out there. Now, there are people that have admitted, yes, they have added some vegetable back. Again, by definition, I still believe they would be considered carnivore, even though they're saying that they really aren't, because they understand the carnivore police out there is going to go after them if they have broccoli or whatever with their meal every once in a while, whatever it is. Here's another interesting thing to consider. Professor Bart K is very big on saying that it's hypercarnivore, which is 70% or more. And he will even say, he has said this even more recently, that he has never gone longer than a 90-day period of strict carnivore. And that's going to be one of the key differences here between regular carnivore and strict carnivore. Strict carnivore pretty much means that you are just eating carnivore foods, right? You are not adding that 30% or less in. You're 100%. Okay. Now, he has said that he's never gone more than 90 days of doing that. So he tends to add something in. He will say that he knows there is no dietary reason to add any carbohydrate to your diet. He'll say that, but he's also human and he will do that sometimes. And that's why he says he's never gone more than 90 days, very strict. So those are all considerations to take in here. And you see how people have blown this whole thing up and talked about so many different things here, people quitting carnivore and so forth. And again, it kind of goes back to that clickbaity topic, that the title being so clickbaity, and why I don't really want to use that title. It's just too clickbaity to me. And you've got to look at it this way. This goes back to the whole message that Coach Bronson said. What I really want to put out there is that people are at different stages of their health, and you can't go by what one person is doing for yourself. Okay. If you are still in the healing process, you're not at the same spot that somebody that has been doing carnivore for 10 years and is fairly lean and fairly healthy, and they could add in a little bit of vegetable and it not affect them. It might affect you. And just because somebody else says, I added in a few vegetables, doesn't mean that you need to do that. And it doesn't also mean that they had to do that. They did. They felt in their own minds that it's what they needed to do. In some cases, I've seen people out there with videos saying, I have tried everything. Not sure if they really did try everything. Kind of the same thing as studies out there. We don't know exactly how accurate some of the studies are out there, right? But they might have thought that, they did everything that they could and things weren't working out for them. And in one case, I've heard somebody say, I actually started to gain a little bit of weight, or I stayed the same, I wasn't losing weight anymore. Well, your body is, when you're on the carnivore diet, your body is going to work to get you to the weight that you should be at. And it might stop at a certain point. You might look really thin, and it might be at that point that it is stopped because you don't need to lose any more weight. In your mind, your eyes, say pointing to you instead to me, but you might think, I really need to lose 10 more pounds, but your body might not think so. So you might have a hard time losing that weight. Also, somebody might be in a situation, like let's take females here, they will have a lot of hormone things happen when they are going through menopause, and that could slow down weight loss. That could actually cause a little bit of weight gain, and you got to get the hormones in track. That doesn't mean necessarily that you need to add carbs. Now, some people might decide to do that, and that's perfectly fine. If you've been watching me, you know that I think everybody should do what they feel is best for them. And somebody could come to the conclusion that they should eat carbs, and that's fine. That's great. But what I don't like, and I heard Dr. Anthony Chafee say this as well, is when someone says you have to add carbs back in. If you do carnivore long term, you're going to get heart disease or whatever else if you don't add carbs back in. And that's not accurate at all. That is just not accurate. There are people that have gone without getting heart disease and have gone on carnivore for years and years. Look at Rick Rodriguez, 42 years carnivore diet. Okay. So it's just not true to say those things. You can't give these absolutes. You can say, you know what, I felt that my best thing was for me to go and add a little bit of vegetable back in. And there may be different reasons why you did it. But when people out there say things like, you have to, you're going to, you know, you're going to get diabetes or something over long term, because people will say, okay, my A1C has gone back up after 10 years or something. My A1C is increasing. Well, it's going to increase a little bit, and you usually will notice that depending on where you're at within about the 2 to 3 year mark. I'm over 3 years. I can tell you my A1C did go up a little bit. It might go up a little bit more. I don't know. It's fine though. Part of that has to do with your red blood cells lasting longer, and then that value, your A1C value, goes up a little bit. So you've got to know all the different things. There's so many different parameters. Here's another parameter to throw out there. Somebody might be starting to gain weight or not losing weight anymore, but doing the same thing that they've always done with carnivore, but now they're stressed or they're not getting proper sleep, like 7 to 9 hours. They're only getting 5-6 hours of sleep every day. Those things will add to cortisol, will add to the possibility of forming your visceral fat and stuff like that. And they can, cause you to gain the weight or to not lose weight anymore. And somebody will say, well, carnivore is not working for me. But in reality, it wasn't the carnivore. It was that they weren't getting enough sleep or whatever it was, that was causing them to get higher stress or something. They had higher stress that was causing issues. So diet is huge, but there are other factors that you have to look at. And you can't just pinpoint and say, it was the carnivore diet that caused the problem for me. And that's the key point that we got to keep in mind. There is nothing wrong with a species appropriate diet. There may be other factors that may influence people, and they may need to do something to fix those factors. Or they may decide, you know what, I tested my own experiment. I added a little bit of vegetable back in, and that, whatever, maybe that changed something with your hormones or whatever it did, and that allowed you to see results again. So you said, that's what I'm going to do. And that's fine. That's great. You can do that. But don't say that everybody's quitting carnivore or that everybody needs to do this because this is what happens long-term on carnivore, because that isn't necessarily what happens long-term on carnivore. That's what happened in your unique situation. And that's pretty much it. I said it. I'm probably going to sit here and think about whether or not I want to publish this video or not. But if you hear me saying this, I published it. I just don't want to be clickbaity. I don't care about the views. My title is definitely not clickbaity. If I only get 30 people watching this video instead of 30,000, oh well, that's fine. I'd like to see more than 30 people actually hear this, because I don't think enough people are talking about it in the community, and I think it's important. I think people need to understand that just because they're seeing this influencer add vegetable back in doesn't mean that they need to, especially if they are unhealthy and if vegetable causes them problems. Do not do that just because you saw somebody saying that they're quitting carnivore, they're adding vegetables back in or whatever. And keep in mind, anyway, the technical definition is 70% or more animal based.